Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the fourth session of the Digital Air Cargo Forum. Today we are going to focus on the vaccines. So I can see already many people joining for this very hot topic or super cold topic. I would like to first thank pharma.aero, who is our supporter and partner for this webinar today. It's pharma.aero and TIACA have also partnered in Project Sunrays, and we are going to go through that in a minute. So today the focus is on vaccines. It's not today, the past months, the focus has been on the COVID vaccines. We have a very packed session planned with starting with updates on the Project Sunrays that we are driving with pharma.aero. And then with a panel discussion on really how stakeholders and the air cargo industry is getting ready to transport the COVID vaccines that are now getting ready to be injected. I would like to remind you that we have a chat box, so questions will be answered. Questions from the audience will be answered at two moments in time. One after this first update on Project Sunrays. So you will be able to ask your questions to Emir Pineda from Miami Airport, who is TIACA board member and co-lead for Project Sunrays, with to also Jay-Z Yip from Changi Airport. She's the vice chair of pharma.aero and the co-lead project manager for Project Sunrays, and Bert Elsen, who's the managing director of For Advice, and Bert is our expert in pharma, the one that is collecting all the information and validating all the information that we will give you regarding the vaccines and the logistics of the vaccines. So welcome to Emir, JC, and Bert, first of all. So the first session is the Project Sunrays update. You will have an opportunity to raise some questions, and then we will go to the panel discussion with Pauli Imonem from the World Food Programme, with Julia from Airbridge Cargo, with Neil from Flexport, with Nathan from Brussels Airport. So all those people will be also here to really discuss the preparedness plan for the COVID vaccines and answer questions that you may have as well. Without further ado, I'd like to share my screen. So let me try to do that. I think it's this one. So do you guys see my screen, like the right thing on slides? Perfect. So this is the project update for Sunrays, and Sunrays is all about shining a light on the COVID vaccines specifications and logistics, as well as the air freight readiness. Emir, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Celine. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you today to discuss Project Sunrays and our most recent findings. But first, I would like to provide you with some background information on our project to set the tone for today's session. Can we go to the next slide, Celine? At the start of this project, we were facing unprecedented levels of urgency, expectations, uncertainties across the global supply chain. If you recall, the pharmaceutical manufacturers were racing to develop vaccines. We had gone through the PPA logistical challenge, product scarcity, air freight capacity shortages, border closures, lockdown restrictions, lack of visibility for customers, commercial wars and diplomatic tensions, and product theft. Now, a few months later, we have additional information, but many of the uncertainties still exist, such as production timelines, volume, trade lanes, capacity requirements, to name just a few. How to decide on what and when and where with no solid market information and in a challenging economic environment is a difficult situation to manage. This is where Project Sunrays comes in. It sets a shining light on the COVID-19 vaccine transport requirements and the level of air freight readiness in the air cargo industry. How does it do this? By collecting insights in the following 4 ways. First, via research and compilation of information available in the public domain. Secondly, by conducting one-to-one interviews with vaccine manufacturers and pharmaceuticals logistics professionals. Thirdly, through industry surveys to collect insights from air freight sector on capabilities, readiness, concerns, and needs. And finally, by weekly engagement with vaccine manufacturers. This concerted effort provides value through analysis and deep dive investigation on specific areas, expertise, guidelines, and recommendations, industry mobilization and collaboration for greater reach and impact. But there are still exceptional circumstances in the pharma world impacting logistics. Next slide. Due to the severity of the COVID-19 virus on people, especially the most vulnerable in our population, along with enormous economic impact it has had on the global markets, has caused an unprecedented challenge to the normal development of vaccines, upending the logistics industry that supports it. The fast-track development of vaccines means logistics providers have limited time to strategize, invest, deploy adequate infrastructure, and develop required skills and processes. Vaccine specifications will impact packaging, containers, active and passive, use of dry ice or not, volume and weight of the shipments, etc. Information on manufacturing production will impact the trade lanes and modes of transportation. That is why obtaining information and engaging the pharma shippers played such an important part of Project Sunrays. At this point, I would like to turn it over to my colleague Bert Elson from 4Advice, who will provide further feedback on the pharma industry. Bert, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Amir. A good day to you all, and thank you to give me the opportunity to explain what we have obtained on information during this interesting project where I was happy to be part of. From the beginning, we have started to work together with our contacts in the pharma industry, as mentioned earlier, to obtain inside information on the development of the vaccine. From the start on, we had defined a short list was a combination of the front runners and the contacts we had. This was our key focus, since these pharma shippers will be the first one to start the supply of the vaccine. Already after the first conversations and questionnaires to the pharma industry, it became clear that there could not be a lot shared at that moment, and the word sensitive and company insight only was a standard reply to all of us. From that moment, as you all know, it was also for us a roller coaster to obtain correct and reliable information which we could share and use for our task force and our Project Sunrays. Next slide, please. One of the key milestones in our project is the publication of a white paper, which will be released in the coming days. In this document, you will find the latest information we have obtained from our Project Sunrays. Some of the focus topics in this paper will be the information we have collected from the pharma shippers, as mentioned in the slide before, like the logistics specifications and potential distribution setup. We noticed here already that a lot of information could not be shared at the moment and still now not, because there are a lot of elements not known. Also, a lot of information is confidential to avoid that changes afterwards will cause conflicts. In the beginning, everybody mentioned dry ice. All the shipments will be containing dry ice. Later, it was all active containers. It changed continuously. All is based on the product temperature and the potential pack-out solution to support this. The $1 million question on flows, trade lanes, capacity here is also that a lot of various information is out there. For example, GSK is working on a treatment together with Sanofi, which is in the phase 3, as we all know. But GSK is also working together with the Chinese manufacturer, which also stepped now into phase 3. So if we mean the GSK manufacturing sites, we need to understand which relationship we're talking about here and which kind of treatment. The same applies for AstraZeneca, Biotech, and some others. To supply the vaccine, a lot of challenges are out there, which we all know. If the UK will receive their first 800,000 doses in a short moment, they need to distribute it over the whole country. If no other supply or other doses will arrive in the next 20 days, they can use only it for 400,000 people because it is a 2-dose vaccine and it needs to be injected within 20 days after the first treatment. If not, you have only a limited protection. Something else, the Pfizer has a 5-dose in one bottle or vial, which can only hold for 5 hours in room temperature. That means you have in 5 hours an equivalent of 5 shots needed to be provided, or else you have waste. If we have temperature deviation in the supply chain, we have waste. If a damage occurs, we have waste. But it impacts the whole planning, as just mentioned earlier. We are important in the supply chain. There is a lot depending on the performance of the air industry. Another outcome of this white paper is the 2 surveys we have obtained and organized in relationship with the vaccine supply. But here you will hear later more in the presentation from our project owners, Emir and JC. Next slide, please. The race is ongoing. I don't have to mention that the start of the supply chain is one of the current biggest challenges. A month ago, there was a forecast which was mentioning end of this year Pfizer to the US and the EMEA approval who will look into it for this year to the EU market. Later, Moderna also published that they will apply for an approval still in 2020 for the FDA and the EMA for the same time. A normal flow is that the FDA and the EMA will approve and most of the countries will use this approval to apply in their country. What is now happening is that all countries are going to apply an emergency approval based on the clinical phase 3 studies. And later, when other information is able and provided, they will approve it for a final approval. Also, other countries agreed a large quantities for phase 3 clinical trials, which is also being sought currently as a vaccine supply. There are examples out there, as been mentioned on the screen. Bahrain published earlier this week, they also applied for the emergency approval to start this year the program with the Pfizer vaccine. A Chinese vaccine manufacturer, Sinovac, who will ship still this year 1.2 million doses to Indonesia for emergency use. So the forecast with some supply of the vaccine still this year and more production starting up from next year is shifting. And as we speak, already starting with more and more countries going in this emergency procedure to start the vaccine campaign as soon as possible. As we are all aware, this will come with some current challenges we're already facing. For example, the year-end, extra volume, current capacity, facility, and equipment. Another challenge, for example, is also the related Brexit for the UK. Current road transport is challenging with the queue at the border at this moment, and the unclear situations for the coming weeks. So the solutioning is by air. They are thinking even to put in a military plane to perform this support to this transport. Next page, please. So, what shippers want? Actually, the shippers has already a lot in place, or they are on the way to organize it from themselves. For example, the packaging material, they are trying to find out a solutioning which will guarantee the product temperature as long as possible, with no interruption of the cold chain. For example, Pfizer demonstrated that their passive packout can maintain 10 days and keep the product temperature on -70 degrees. There is a high spotlight on this worldwide supply chain, which gives us all a serious pressure. Example, a small town in Belgium, Puurs, where the first commercial COVID-19 vaccine is manufactured for Pfizer and is shipped last week to the US. 2 days ago, more than 20 television stations and 10 writers of the international press were installed over there. In Belgium, they are already mentioning it's an international press alternative for the international festival in the neighbor town Tomorrowland, which ironically was cancelled due to the COVID-19. So, if the vaccine supply will gear up by the end of this year or beginning of next year, all these shipments will be followed with an international focus. Every hiccup, delay, mistake will be spread out on the international press. The pharma shippers are requiring is that the air industry is performing for 99.9% every time, all the time, due to the specifications of the vaccine. No deviation is allowed in timing and temperature. Therefore, we need a transparency in our operations, in our data flow. Let's work together and let's be ready to support the biggest supply chain ever, the distribution of the COVID-19 vaccine. So let's see what our survey is telling us, together with information we have obtained from our task force. JC, I hand over here for more insight in this matter. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Bert. The current unknowns and yet rapid developments are certainly making air logistics planning very challenging. We have just heard from Bert that there are also high expectations on the logistics providers, including the global air cargo industry. Hence, the question is, how is the air cargo industry coping? How ready are we in dealing with this Herculean task ahead of us? 3 months ago, in early September, Project Sunrays rolled out our first edition of the Global Air Freight Readiness Surveys, and there were some concerns regarding industry readiness level. Last month, we launched the second edition of the survey to gauge the latest state of readiness. The second survey was participated by 196 respondents across the air cargo supply chain, including freight forwarders, which we have about 40% of the respondents, airlines, airports, ground handlers, road feeder services providers, as well as solution providers. Next slide, please. Now, it is very encouraging and also very heartening to see that the average preparedness score has actually improved from the earlier 6.32 to 6.92, with a larger group of respondents feeling very well prepared, those who scored between 8 to 10. However, when we drill down further, we also found that most of the respondents which rated 5 or below this time rounds were logistics players that were not participating in the global logistics space, and they may not have direct engagement with vaccines manufacturers. Next slide, please, Celine. Notwithstanding this, 79% of the respondents are generally feeling more prepared than 3 months ago. So at this juncture, we just wish to take a pause here and congratulate the industry for your readiness progression as well as industry collaboration. Next slide, please. During this presentation, I would also like to single out the group which are most ready and have scored the highest readiness. This group actually came from cargo stakeholders that have, number 1, begun close engagement with vaccines manufacturers, number 2, forged collaboration with supply chain partners, and thirdly, have already set up a dedicated COVID-19 vaccines task force. This highlights the importance of 360-degree collaboration as well as communication in this upcoming logistical challenge. Next slide, please. As compared to 3 months ago, more COVID-19 vaccine supply chain information have been made available, providing more certainties as well as confidence to the air cargo industry. As such, 91% of the air cargo industry are feeling more informed right now. The main sources of information are directly through their supply chain partners, the vaccines manufacturers, mainstream, and trade media. Over 20% of the respondents have also gleaned insights from Sunrays, webinars, as well as presentations. Next slide, please. We also saw that the air cargo industry is coming together both locally as well as globally. Half of the respondents have fact back that they have witnessed more collaboration than before within the industry. The COVID-19 crisis, while has brought people physically apart, has drawn the air cargo industry closer. Next slide, please. With the imminent COVID-19 vaccines distribution, we also took the opportunity to seek feedback from the industry on their forward outlook of their pharma business. 88% of the respondents are expecting year-on-year increase in their pharma volumes in 2021, with cargo handlers feeling the most upbeat. Next slide, please. When we asked in terms of cargo revenue, 79% projected a year-on-year increase in pharmaceutical revenue, again with cargo handlers being the most upbeat. From both results, we could draw some inferences that pre-COVID, cargo handlers have already been investing in cold chain infrastructure, equipment, manpower training, and standards, and they are now seeing payoff in their investments. Next slide, please. The air cargo industry, through this survey, also shared with us that they will continue to invest in their pharmaceutical business. 64% of the respondents are preparing further investment next year, not only to meet the increased demands of the pharmaceutical business, as well as in view of the COVID-19 vaccine distribution. And some of this investment includes, number one, beefing up their pharmaceutical team, and number two, expanding their cold chain infrastructure as well as equipment. So on this note, I would like to pass back the time to Amir, who will present the final part of the presentation, which will include the measures and actions that the industry has executed or planning to undertake for the COVID-19 vaccine distribution. Amir, over to you.
Thank you, JC. Next slide, please. Now, let's examine some information from our original survey. When we asked the industry, what are your main risks, real or perceived, linked to the transport of the COVID-19 vaccine in huge quantity, limited time frame, and during current economic downturn, they listed these 8 major concerns: temperature excursions, lack of visibility, lack of adequate infrastructure, capacity storage, unexpected delays, end-to-end connectivity, security, and cost. All these concerns have strong foundation, and as an industry, we need to mitigate as many as possible, but we cannot stop planning. We need to anticipate as best we can, even when information is lacking. Next slide, please. All of us in this industry know anticipating and managing risks are part of the DNA of the air cargo industry. We do this every day, no matter where you work, whether you are a freight forwarder, an airline, a ground handler, trucking company, airport, or other. In response to the concerns from the previous slide, the air freight industry has come up with the following mitigating strategies. First, training more staff, setting up a 24/7 control tower to handle irregularities, adding cargo capacity, facilitating approval of additional charter flights and planning special slots, educating customers on load optimization and container utilization to maximize space on an aircraft. Mapping current capabilities at origin, transit, and destination points. Expanding cargo facilities to include new cargo storage infrastructure. Securing availability of containers, dry ice, space, etc. And finally, using or encouraging the use of monitoring devices. Next slide, please. When we asked whether your organizations are planning to introduce additional and/or premium services for shippers or clients, the respondents said 49% will. Another 42% may introduce additional and/or premium service, and those included things such as dedicated teams, special care service, 24/7 availability, airside thermal protection, guaranteed insurance on vaccine transported, express bookings, fast breakdown, clearance at any time, and tailor-made products with special handling and monitoring of temperature control, along with the timely information to the shipper, which is quite important. Next slide, please. Now, when it came to organizations planning to invest in additional infrastructure, here the responses were a bit lower, with 36% will, another 41% may invest in additional physical or digital infrastructure. The type of infrastructure mostly dealt with additional staff, training, cool rooms, storage facilities, containers, mobile temperature readers, data loggers, sockets, aircraft charters, and also software and data platforms such as cargo community systems were outlined. Next slide, please. On this slide, we reference existing cooling chain capabilities, asking, is your organization currently able to handle, store, transport temperature-controlled shipments? If we review feedback on facilities, we notice that already a lot of capabilities are available, particularly in the 15 to 25 degrees Celsius and the 2 to 8 degrees Celsius, but also in the minus 20 degrees Celsius, shipments can be handled and stored, which is providing good trust in our industry. The low numbers of deep frozen capabilities doesn't prevent air cargo to handle, transport, and store deep frozen vaccines. It will require a combination of adequate infrastructure, proper packaging, training, and enough dry ice, along with refill stations to manage properly. This analysis beckons the questions we may need to ask ourselves. Can we support a lane with related required capabilities? This means departure locations and arrival locations. This information on capabilities available so that everybody in the chain can do the same. And finally, if we have the capabilities, are we ready to handle what kind of volumes? Can we do this? And the answer is basically yes. Next slide. Now, in this final slide covering the survey dealing with cool chain ground equipment and ULDs, we asked, does your organization have access to cool chain ground equipment and ULDs? Please specify the type of cool chain ground equipment and ULDs used. 54% of respondents have some type of cool chain ground equipment and ULD in place. Among the special equipment included were pallet shippers, cool room active containers, thermal blankets, thermal dollies, reefer trucks, and last mile delivery vans. Next slide, please. Now we've come to the conclusion of our presentation. And in conclusion, we face an enormous challenge ahead. The global air cargo logistics industry has never faced anything like this before. Just the scale of the vaccine distribution, 8 billion people, is mind-blowing. We know vaccines will soon have emergency use authorization from multiple countries, and that in some countries, distribution and vaccination have already begun. We have identified what shippers want: speed, security, reliability, and transparency, and have seen the results of the second survey indicating that 46% now feel prepared versus 28% in the previous survey. We see an industry collaborating and communicating, with 91% now feeling more informed. At the present time, 88% of air freight professionals expect an increase in their pharma volumes, and 79% forecast an increase in their pharma revenues. 64% of air cargo stakeholders project an increase in their investments to sustain their pharma business next year, another positive economic indicator. We know the top 8 concerns of the industry: temperature, lack of visibility, lack of infrastructure, capacity storage, delays, end-to-end connectivity, security, and cost. We also know that anticipating and managing risks are part of the DNA of every air cargo professional. We also learned that there is some appetite for investment in service and infrastructure. The industry is also well equipped to handle temperature control shipments, and that it has solutions available for deep frozen shipments. And finally, at present, 54% of the industry has cold chain equipment already in place. So now the time has come for a call to action. First, strengthening industry collaboration. TIACA and Pharma.Aero urge the air cargo and pharma industries to further strengthen dialogue and cooperation and leave no one outside the conversation. Vaccine manufacturers need to share reliable information needed by all their logistics providers as early as possible to allow them to prepare and invest accordingly. And air cargo players should also ensure their subcontractors and supply chain partners, including trucking companies, receive the right level of information as soon as possible. TIACA and Pharma.Aero call on the industry to adopt local air cargo community approaches. If not done yet, to strengthen the collaboration at the local level to meet the vaccine challenge, as well as to accelerate the sustainable and digital transformation of air cargo in the longer term. Next, ensuring high level of security. Security and cybersecurity measures need to be put in place to avoid theft and counterfeit. Each organization involved in the supply chain needs to stay vigilant and connected with the local, state, and federal authorities to anticipate, identify, alert, and stop these physical and cyber threats. We need ramping up of air cargo capabilities. Dry ice, active containers, trained staff, and cold chain space availability should be secured early as possible. Infrastructure investment decision should also be made as early as possible. Improving visibility. Each air cargo stakeholder should map its existing capabilities at each location and make this information available. IATA has launched its One Source platform, and TIACA and Pharma.Aero urge every stakeholder to ensure this data is made available and accurate on the platform. The use of tracking and monitoring devices should be encouraged, and the approval process for their safe use in flights needs to start as soon as possible. Rollout of digital solutions and data sharing platforms should be accelerated. Now to removing barriers. Governments, customs authorities, and border agencies should be ready to facilitate and expedite all COVID-19 related goods. And finally, support from our NGOs, or supporting our NGOs. International organizations, NGOs, and donors should support cold chain capacity building efforts in least developed countries to ensure no one is left behind in the upcoming global immunization campaign. Now, finally, I would like to leave you with this simple formula for the successful distribution of the COVID-19 vaccine. People plus infrastructure plus standards plus packaging plus dry ice plus collaboration save lives. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you today. Now I would like to turn it back over to Celine for the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Amir. Thank you, JC and Bert. We already have quite a lot of questions in the Q&A and the chat box. Still don't understand why we have two, but we are managing the questions on both. So it has been 4 months that our two organizations are working together on Project Sunrays, and so much has happened. And it's still, as Bert was explaining, we have now the race for emergency use authorizations, and now we are starting to see a lot of movement, concrete in terms of logistics. So this project is clearly, it was timely and it's not over yet. So given the type of question we have, what I suggest, because it's very much linked to the preparedness. So what I suggest is we invite our other panelists, and we will tackle the questions we have on the chat box, together with the questions that we already prepared for the panel. We have some very specific questions on, the use of what type of containers we need to use, passive, active, questions around waste, question around the security measures. So I suggest that we bring our other speakers also in the discussion. So Julia, Neil, Pauli, and Nathan, if you can switch on your camera. Thank you, guys. We still miss Pauli. Yeah, good, full room. So again, Emir from Miami Airport, Bert from Advice, JC from Changi Airport, Nathan from Brussels Airport. It doesn't mean that this is all led by airports, but pharma.aero and Tiaka have a strong presence from airports also in the projects that they are driving respectively. Very good news, by the way. Julia from Airbridge Cargo, that is very well advanced in the vaccine transportation, and we can see Airbridge Cargo everywhere in the press regarding the COVID vaccines. So I bet, Julia, you will have a lot to share with us, and I bet lots of questions are going to be directed to you as well for very precise elements. Neil from Flexport, from your hotel room, Neil, and Pauli. Pauli is an aviation consultant for the World Food Programme based in Geneva at the World Health Organization office as part of the special COVID task force. So thank you, everyone. Let me just maybe quickly. You don't see my screen, right? I stopped sharing the slides. Is that correct? Cool. Because I'm trying to deal with only a small screen and I can't see everything. So I just wanted to make sure. So, as part of the two air freight readiness surveys that we had in September and in November, one of the first questions that we raised, and it's how we also describe the outcomes. It's the readiness. So we ask people to score their readiness level from 1 being the least ready to 10 being the most ready. Can I ask you guys which score you would put on your own companies in terms of your readiness to handle? I would like to start with Julia.
Okay, so I would actually take 8, I think, 8.5 maybe. Because there internally we have set up the processes, we do have the quality management system and really transporting pharmaceuticals for a long time already, but there are still so many variables that are simply beyond our control. So we cannot really change or influence, like customs, complications, and a lot of other topics. That's why I would go with 8.
Okay, good. Nathan?
Well, if I speak on behalf of the Brussels air cargo community, I would definitely also give ourselves a score of at least 8. You're never fully prepared, I guess, but we have set up a local task force already 5 months ago. And we have prepared a lot of different logistics scenarios because, as Julia already mentioned and the previous speakers, there's still a lot of unknowns. So we are preparing for various scenarios, and it's only when the actual shipments, the large number of shipments will start flowing, that we will be fully ready and we'll be able to put everything in place.
Okay, so 2 8. And we will come back also on the importance of those local cargo communities and special task force in the discussion. JC.
Well, I would also like to give a high score for the Singapore Changi Airport community. I just want to add that actually for Changi Airport and for most airports, handling pharmaceuticals and vaccines have been going on for many years, right? We are very familiar with handling pharma as well as vaccines. But as what Nathan has mentioned, I think the challenge for the COVID-19 vaccine is that there are still a lot of unknowns and uncertainties, and it will all bunch up at the same time. So it is very important that we start looking at local and global collaboration in order to tide us through this challenge.
Neil, what about you?
Well, I'm a pretty optimistic guy overall. I'm not at an 8 yet. I think the industry is probably closer to a 7, 7.5. And I think, you have to look at this in the context of where we've come, right? If you asked this question 3 months ago, you might have gotten an answer of a 2 or a 3, right? Because there was so much that was unknown. Everybody was terrified of what was coming. And I think we've learned a lot more and we've moved up that scale. I still think there are a lot of unknowns. I think that like with anything this complicated and this huge, there are going to be a number of roadblocks get thrown in our way. And you can't solve what you don't know right now. But I think the one really good thing for this industry, the collaboration has been fantastic. Organizations like this have really pushed information out. And I think that's the key. So I think while I'm at a 7 or 7.5, I think that when push comes to shove at the end of the day, we'll probably execute at a 9. Look forward to that.
Good. Emir.
Yeah, good morning. I think in our case, we're probably, like Neil was saying, maybe closer to 7, 7.5 in our community. The unknowns, as everyone has already talked about, are still out there. We also rely heavily on our tenants and stakeholders for the processing movement of the actual vaccines. In our case, the airport plays a more of a facilitator role. So it's a more of a background role, but still leading the community and collaborating and making sure the communication is out there and making sure that we are all on the same page and trying to get prepared as possible. But again, it's just so many unknowns right now that difficult to estimate. So I would say, well, we'll stick with the 7, 7.5, and hopefully, like Neil was saying, as we move forward, we move up that line to the 9 and closer to 10 as the vaccines start going through distribution.
So you guys are all, above the industry average of 6.92. What about you, Pauli, in the UN with WFP and with your other UN partners? You are on mute. You're the first one to be on mute. We'll see how many times I say that.
Hopefully last. So good afternoon, good morning, good evening. We are definitely very much depending on the context. We were carrying successfully vaccines, a non-COVID vaccine last weekend, so we could say 10. If you ask about the -80 product into a conflict area, into behind the lines in Yemen, we are definitely not at 10. Every country is different, every product is different, and I And as you know, United Nations, we and World Food Programme, we always partner with the industry. So I will say that we are at least as well prepared as the industry. So the 6.92.
Okay. 6.9.
Average, but again, it depends on a lot of countries. In some area, it's totally different than in some others.
Yeah, I bet. We will also come back to that on the various distribution plans per region of the world. Bert, I guess you are 10 because you are like frontline checking and getting the information directly from the vaccines manufacturers. Too bad you are not transporting vaccines yourself.
That's correct, but I should not say, as everybody stated, that I'll be fully ready. As we said, all of us still unknown things out of there. So the question is, for what we need to be prepared. So I think this initiative like Sunrays is helping us to get to the next level, to the industry collaboration, to get and gain information from everybody, from all those angles. To actually help the industry, air industry, to go to from an 8 to a 9 or from a 9.5. So I'm happy to be part of it. And yes, let's aim for the next half point or 1 point to improve.
Yeah. And it was really one of the objectives that we had when we started this project Sunrays, to give more information and also like validate some of the information, because it's not that the industry is lacking really information. We have a tsunami of news, but it's really the reliable source of information. So to you all, you don't have all to answer, but what are the type of information that you are still missing? From the survey, we kept receiving, like comments on we still need information on concrete volumes and concrete trade lanes and timelines. So apart from that, what else do you miss? If you miss something. Neil?
Well, I'll go ahead and kick it off. I think, this is going to be from a U.S. perspective, because it's what I know the best, is that I still think that there's a lot of variability right now in local distribution sort of strategy. And I think some geographies are well ahead of others. And I think right there, there is this supply chain to the distribution facility, and then there's that supply chain from the distribution to the ultimate sort of the injection, right? And I think that might be the most challenging part right now. And so I think that we need more clarity on that. It's being left up to local communities and state governments, for example, to solve many of these sorts of logistics issues, and some are just well ahead of others, from a planning perspective. So I think we need more clarity there, and that will sort of evolve, and it'll very much depend on the type of vaccine, right? The Pfizer super cold versus the Johnson & Johnson is more ambient. So I think that's going to play a big role in how communities deal with it.
Neil, as a freight forwarder, you deal with really the end-to-end and the last mile, and as a freight forwarder acting in every part of the world, how do you deal with the various scenarios per country and etc.? Do you have like local type of information yourself that you receive?
Well, of course. I mean, like every geography is going to have a different strategy, to a certain extent. And a lot of it's going to depend on the availability of infrastructure to support certain vaccines and to store them, and for how long, and the quality of the roads and all of that in terms of the role that over the road transportation plays versus direct air freight and even into small communities. So yeah, you can't just take a global view on this thing. You have to get down to the local level, and you count on information flows and expertise at that level in order to formulate your complete plan.
Yeah. Julia, what on your side, do you miss any, specific information still?
Yes, I think first is production capabilities of some pharmaceutical companies. The information is changing all the time, so we don't know really if there is going to be a need for a full charter or part charter or scheduled operations. What are the volumes that the manufacturer can produce in one day, or how many days do we have to transport these volumes that they're requesting? And I think very important topic for us to understand too is the risk assessment of many airports. That, it would be nice if we could only transport vaccines from one conventional and convenient airport to another, but it's not always the case. And most of the times, especially for developing countries, it will be analyzing the risks and understanding, can this or that airport handle? So what needs to be done from our side in collaboration with airport ground handlers is really to go and dig into these smaller airports, check what risks are there, security, pilferage, really capacities available, and so on. And that's a lot of information we need to gather together.
Mm-hmm. Pauli, what do you think about that?
Same, a lot of similar questions. The main point is data.
We can't hear you very well. Maybe if you can just go closer to your mic.
Is a lot like Julia, so it's all about data. So what needs to be carried? Where does it need to be carried? For example, the question, will it go only to the capital city of each country, or will it go to every airport on that country? When? Of course, we know it's 2021, but more detail than that, what was the production schedule and distribution schedule? On the what, I think the main question is that we have different manufacturers which have different temperature. They also have different packaging. They have also different time, how much they can stay in different temperatures. So I'm looking forward to the document which Bert Elsen mentioned earlier on this webinar. And still lots of uncertainty about volumes and weights and those. So in order to make a precise plan, you need precise information, and that's not yet fully possible. And finally, the airport capacity is not, there is no reliable source where you can find everything about high loaders and normal loaders and cold capacity, cubic temperature, and so this is very time consuming.
Yeah. Okay. So I bet, Bert, we are going to answer quite a lot of questions, not all of them, but some of those questions in the white paper that we are about to release. It went to press, to the designer, and it's really a matter of days now to release it. Do you know, with your conversation you have with vaccines producer, do you know if they themselves know their production capacity?
No, of course they know what is a forecasted production capacity, but it's more than that. Manufacturers are still looking in third manufacturing, going into relationship or in contracting with other manufacturings. And let's take the Serum Institute in India, where they're going to go for an extra capacity to produce, but also in other countries, they're looking into local production to bring it locally, and it's changing, it's evaluating continuously. I think the front runners has been, we are knowing Moderna, Pfizer, and I think the Cancino, they are already in the final stage. They have the packaging already final approved. But for some others, they are still in the configuration of the packaging. So we cannot define volumes, we cannot define capacity, we cannot define how much there will be produced. And also the planning aspect, it's not known. So there are still a lot of unclarities. What everybody needs, of course, is how many can be manufactured, because we hear Pfizer deal, Bahrain 800,000, there 800,000, but is Pfizer ready to produce all those things still this month? I don't know. Yeah. It's a question not for me, but those things are coming up. How many can they produce in 1 week? Where it needs to go? A lot of inside information we probably will not know in a short period. So a lot of challenges out there. So absolutely, and there's in the white paper, not all the solutions will be there, but I hope, yeah, it's a basic.
Hey,
Okay.
Celine, just to
Yes.
add on to what Bert is saying is that, remember, I mean, the supply chain works two ways with this vaccine, right? So it's not only what's coming out of these manufacturing facilities, but the input, the raw materials that are going in. And, you know, they have to make sure that these two are in sync with one another, and that they have enough of these raw materials sort of coming in order to meet these very aggressive production schedules. And, you know, we had the first example of this sort of falling down when Pfizer, you know, particularly for their US commitment, they had committed to send 40 million doses within the first 2 weeks, and they cut that in half to 20 million. And they blamed it on raw materials, and they blamed it on sort of input factors. And so, you know, we can't forget about the sort of, you know, the first part of this logistics change, which is everything that's going into these facilities, and it's coming from all over the world, right? That's going in order to create the you know, the vaccine, and the two have to be in sync. And I think right now we're still stumbling a little bit with this piece of it.
Okay, so I heard Julia and Pauli saying that it would be helpful to really understand the type of capabilities that airports and ground handlers, so at local stations, have. IATA, and it's my former team, so I'm really proud of them. They have launched this one source platform. Do you think this can help you guys if everyone is really contributing to that platform and indicating the real capabilities they have on that? Will it help you, Julia?
Celine, the main and the key word is if everybody's contributing and sharing the information, because I think that is something that, yeah, well, we know big data and everybody's trying sometimes to keep information to themselves, you know, not to share too much. But I think that is absolutely crucial to have this open, because, you know, you can put something on paper and call it SOP, but how do you really measure if the quality is really maintained? So you need to put the actual information, like the exposure times, the actual capabilities. That is the only way to really have this collaboration between all stakeholders, I think.
Indeed. So, guys, at the airport, do you think you should play a role to push your community to contribute and populate the one source? Nathan.
Well, absolutely, Celine, and we actually already are. I think it's a great initiative IATA has taken. Instead of each and every individual airline and forwarder doing its own audits, which is impossible. You cannot audit all the suppliers in the world. It's a good initiative to share data. I think IATA already sits on a lot of data. They have been doing these CIV audits at a lot of airports with a lot of air cargo industry operators. So that is validated data. On top of that, there's a lot of operators in our industry that want to share that type of capability data. So we have been working for the past months already with IATA, with the team, to populate the database to make sure that all our capabilities will be clearly visible and transparent. And I hope other airports and operators follow that lead and welcome the initiative of IATA, because it will be a great tool to create transparency.
Yeah, transparency, openness. We need accurate data as well on that. JC, is it something also that you tackle at Changi Airport within the Singapore community?
Yeah, so I actually echo with your view, Celine, as well as Nathan. I think the One Source initiative is an excellent one in order to have to create more transparency of each of the airport communities. But there's one thing maybe I stand corrected. So my last understanding is for one source, only entities that are CIV certified or part of the Smart Terminal program, are being the information are being availed on the platform. So I'm not so sure whether IATA will be opening up to other entities that are in developing countries that are not part of the CEIV program.
Okay,
anyway,
so
I stand corrected on this.
Maybe we need to double check with them. My understanding was that the CEIV information and the smart facility audit, so all the information that are verified, so you can really rely on it. But then you have, if I'm not mistaken, you have an opportunity to input and to self-declare your capabilities. So I think it's also the responsibility for each and every stakeholder in that case to put really accurate set of information, because
Exactly.
Otherwise it's just lack of trust in the industry. It's also leading to issues if you self-declare something that is not the reality, and linked to the questions around waste. It's not going to help the industry to limit the waste for the vaccines. So there is really also a responsibility for stakeholders to contribute, but to make sure that they contribute seriously with the right set of information. Great. So we talked about the local air cargo communities, and I'd like to go a bit more into that. How do you think it drives improvement, it drives preparedness in your own community? And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Emir, JC, and Nathan, in your 3 locations, you have those local communities and COVID task force. Emir, how does it work in Miami?
Yeah, that's correct. We have our own task force here. It's basically led by the airport, and we have membership from all the major stakeholders across the supply chain: forwarders, airlines, ground handling companies, logistics companies, the integrated carriers, you name it, they're part of our task force. And basically we've been talking about preparedness and planning for the last 2 or 3 months now, through webinars similar to this, where we get all the stakeholders on board and talk about the different challenges. One of our challenges here in our area is dry ice, and the demand for dry ice is something that, again, is one of those big unknowns for us. And here in Florida, interesting enough, there is no dry ice manufacturing. We actually get our dry ice from Georgia, which is quite a ways away from Miami and South Florida. So you can imagine a little bit of the logistics challenges faced with obtaining dry ice, in particular in the coming months, as it becomes more and more important to have it available. But in essence, the stakeholders and the airport have gathered and have discussed the challenges that are being facing the industry and the potential solutions. We at the airport have mapped out all of our facilities, the infrastructure. We're a CIV certified airport. We have 5 CIV certified companies at the airport, soon to have 6. When you gather all of this information, and as you were saying, and Nathan and JC were mentioning earlier, using IATA's one source and gather all that information and share it, and I emphasize the word sharing because that's very important. Not only do we have to be transparent, but we need to share this information so that companies like Julia's can use it when they're making decisions as to where to fly the vaccines and how easy it is to use your facilities and infrastructure versus other airports. So this is something we've been working on for some time now. We feel pretty confident. We're having another stakeholders meeting here before the end of the year to kind of sum up some of the things that are coming out of this particular webinar and some of the things that are going on a domestic level here in the United States with Operation Warp Speed, just to make sure everybody's informed and on the same page as we move forward into distribution of vaccine in the coming weeks and months.
Mm-hmm. Nathan? it's something that you've started before, way before COVID, the local air cargo community.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important that a community comes together and to share information and to see how they can improve as a community, as a supply chain, because there's always weak links that you can improve, and whether it's an airport that takes the initiative, or a dominant local operator, an airline or a home carrier, or a separate association, that's not really the point. The point is how can you work together, because there's always areas for improvement, and you can only do it by collaborating in a community, because there's a fragmented supply chain. And on top of that, there's a couple of initiatives that simply require collaboration. If we simply look at data sharing, for example, setting up a control tower type of system where you share information on the status of shipments throughout the supply chain, well, that's something you cannot do as an individual operator. So that requires collaboration, that requires investment in basic IT infrastructure, data sharing platforms. And I think a lot of airports are taking those steps over the past years, and more recently, the COVID vaccine distribution is probably a good leverage point to kickstart some of those initiatives, or to give them some more speed. And also at our airport, we definitely decided that this is the next step forward, where it's not even a missing link we have to eliminate. It's a next step we have to take in order to professionalize the way our industry.
Okay, so talking about the role of those communities, does it mean that at least it can support also the small and medium-sized players to also join that business and not just keep it for the big guys? Would you say so?
I would definitely say so. In our community, it's basically made up of small guys. We have the major forwarders and large airlines, but we have many small players, smaller, medium-sized forwarders, and some of the smaller carriers in our community that make up the bulk of our cargo community. So it's very important and part of the group.
Yeah, because when we looked at the survey results and JC presented the portion of those stakeholders that are feeling less prepared, that scored 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, on the scale of 10. It was mainly small and medium-sized players. So there is a way to bring them on board, to increase the information they get, to increase their level of preparedness, because we are as weak as the weakest link, as we usually say. So it's important to bring everyone and not leave anybody left outside of the conversation. Sorry. Okay. One super hot or super cold topic that we have, the discussion around the dry ice limitations. So, Julia, how do you overcome the dry ice limitation on your side?
Yes, indeed, a very hot topic. So, of course, we had never faced any questions like this before. I would say 2019, that was out of the question. But this year, we have decided that, okay, we need to make some steps. There was a lot of internal conversations, hot discussions as well. And we have decided to use a very straightforward approach to go directly to Boeing, which is the manufacturer of our planes that we are flying, and really get instructions or guidelines from their side. So now we have managed to increase the 747 freighter limitations from 3 tons, which is the standard more or less, to 10 or even 12 tons per flight, using this special calculation formula for sublimation rate of dry ice. So it's a very specific topic that is going through our DG department, but this way we're able to offer more options and opportunities to transport the containers that are using technology that have dry ice, or even passive packaging that is using dry ice for cooling.
Okay, and you have to go through the approval of the Civil Aviation Authority you are depending on, right?
No, we just using our internal dangerous goods departments. Yes, we got all the instructions from Boeing directly, their recommendations as well.
Okay.
And we have incorporated those into our internal procedure for handling dry ice.
Okay. What about you, Neil?
Just to add, Celine, if you're for example, if you're a U.S. carrier, you have to get FAA approval.
Okay.
To increase your limits, which they recently did to 15,000 pounds. So, 7,000 kilos effectively on 777-200, 300 passenger aircraft that are flying as cargo charters. So I think it does depend on where you're domiciled. But if you're a U.S. carrier, which United flew the first Pfizer vaccines over, they had to get the waiver from the FAA, and they have granted that for certain aircraft types up to 15,000 pounds, and they'll add other aircraft types over the coming weeks to that to allow for more aircraft types to participate in the supply chain.
Okay.
I think, Celine, just to combine
Nathan.
two elements here we just discussed the dry ice limitations, and we discussed being transparent on capabilities. I think it would also be interesting to see how we can connect those two in the next weeks and months, and how perhaps IATA with the one source platform or other industry operators such as Validate to make sure that information is accessible, that also their airlines can share that information publicly with the industry, so that we do not have to find that information on an individual basis. So it would be interesting to see how that will evolve.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. So it's also about sharing, information. By the way, we have a comment and that I'd like to share in the chat box. The fact that we are mentioning one source doesn't mean that it's the only way to put data available on the industry capabilities. There are other solutions like Validate that are available. If I'm not mistaken, Validate is this trade lane vision. Maybe one of you can say more. So there are solutions available on the market today to share the capabilities of every station, and the message on our side is really to make sure that this type of information is made available where it has to be, to simplify the life of your supply chain partners, and to make sure that also all those information are accurate. So the key message is transparency, but also reliability on the type of information you are sharing. Just I wanted to address that. Pauli, how do you deal with the issue of dry ice limitations yourself?
Well, as you know, WSP doesn't own any aircraft, so we again use the aircraft of the industry, and it's really dealing with the operator to asking him whether this limit is really the upper limit, or whether there is way to get it higher, like British Cargo or Organium Group did. And I was in touch with Boeing and Airbus, and actually the limits which usually are within airlines in Europe are usually very low, and by recalculating it, it's quite relatively easy to go to a limit which is way higher, like happened with the example mentioned by Julia. The other issue is, of course, to use packaging which doesn't need dry ice, so phase change gel and this kind of product. Also, there is way to, by having an additional stop and ventilating, you can have a higher limit on the same aircraft type. There is way to respect, of course, all the safety rules, but still to optimize the amount of dry ice on board. Then, secondly, what is a challenge for us is the non-Airbus, non-Boeing aircraft. I haven't seen anything on regional jets or on turboprop, or even smaller plane like Cessna 208 or so on, which even the operation manual doesn't even say the limits of dry ice. So this is of course a challenge for us when we come closer to the last mile, because the type of aircraft will most likely be non-Airbus, non-Boeing.
Okay. Good. As we were discussing with you, Pauli, maybe we can, because I see also questions in the chat box related to how we you in the UN are getting organized to and ready to deliver the vaccines in the lower income countries. So if you can explain a bit the mechanism that is going to be put in place through COVAX and the UN model.
Well, as you know, United Nations is a family of organizations. There is several UN agencies working on this. The three main one is the World Health Organization, WHO, then UNICEF, which is the United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund, and then World Food Program, so WFP, and they are all in constant dialogue and cooperating and finding a way to work together to ensure that nobody will be left without a vaccine. UNICEF has a special expertise while being the Children Emergency Fund, they have a special expertise in vaccine, and the World Food Program, while being the Food and Hunger Agency of the United Nations, we have a special expertise in logistics, and we are also the UN agency responsible for managing airplane. So that's the way, that's the organization which are dealing with, and how it's practically will be done is in the same way that we deliver food at the moment, and how we deliver other humanitarian commodities worldwide, which we did already before COVID, but we have done since COVID that in way over 100 countries, and having deliveries every day, also in conflict areas. And basically the same supply chain systems will of course be used also to deliver temperature controlled cargo, with of course the care it's need. We will of course also make good use of the UNHRD, which is the United Nations Humanitarian Response Depot. So we have several storage areas around the world, and those will also be leveraged for this transport chain as needed.
Mm-hmm. Do you know if you are going to use like active containers to maintain the temperature, or do you think you can distribute vaccines using the passive boxes, maybe the ones that are like that you don't need to open for up to 10 days? Is it something that you have already in mind?
And personally, I'm a simple man, so I will love to have one solution for every country since the factory, but I'm afraid that we will have a different, most likely we'll have a combination solution, both active and passive, and even hybrid, also different type of passive, some with dry ice, some with gel, some with a combination, bigger and smaller one. I could foresee that from a factory to a storage hub, you may have a wide body plane with active container. I could foresee that the last mile, maybe to a local airport in Africa, probably the box cannot be bigger than 25 kilograms, so that a human being can carry it, because we may go to an airport without forklift or without high loader. So definitely we will have all type of or several type of solution depending of the country, depending of the volumes, and of course depending of the temperature of the cargo.
Okay, good. So going to another area of the world, EMEA. Do you know how Latin America and Caribbean islands are going to be supplied? Because usually Miami Airport is quite a hub for Latin America.
Yeah, that's correct, and hopefully a lot of that distribution does go through Miami, and that's really the expectation. Many of these smaller islands and some of the larger nations in Latin America, as Polly was alluding, have limited infrastructure available. So using Miami as that distribution point coming from larger aircraft or connecting via Miami to some of these smaller island nations and or Latin America is probably the way that a lot of the vaccine is going to take place and distributed throughout the region. We also know that in some cases, like Brazil, for example, a lot of the vaccines are going to be going to Sao Paulo, for example, and from there they're going to distribute throughout their country. So it's a centralized system that they've adopted in that particular market. And they have bought quite a bit of the Chinese vaccine from Sinovac, and some of that is already being transported to Brazil through charter flights. We believe that in the near future, a lot of that may come through Miami as distribution expands into places like Brazil and Argentina and many of the other countries in Latin America. So yeah, we think a lot of it's going to go through our airport because of the connectivity that we have with the region, which is quite large.
If we stay in Americas, Neil, we heard one of the goals of the Operation Warp Speed in the US is to have doses available for all Americans by April next year. Is it something that the logistics system in the US is ready to deal with?
Yeah, I think overall, I think the answer to that question is yes. I do think that the distribution exists. We have, very strong coverage from the integrators. Both FedEx and UPS have, not only really increased their capabilities at their hubs, but also have massive networks and ability to distribute via air. The road network is very good and effective. So I do think that the infrastructure can support, let's say, getting the vaccine to all of the different geographic nodes that are necessary, to be able to vaccinate everybody. I mean, whether everybody lines up for the vaccine or whether there's actually enough vaccine, right? We talked about, that we've ordered enough, but whether enough it gets manufactured during that time frame, I think still remains to be seen. But I do think that distribution, I think will be there. And I think that if you want a vaccine, you should be able to get one, by the end of April, probably May at the latest. And I think that's sort of the latest from the Operation Warp Speed folks as well.
Mm-hmm. So domestically in the US, is it going to be airborne, or is it going to be trucked, or is it going to be mixed? In your view?
All of the above. I think you're going to get a lot of, depending on the length of haul from particularly the manufacturing locations, a lot of this vaccine will be manufactured in the US. A lot of the manufacturing is east of the Mississippi River, sort of in the eastern seaboard of the US or in the Midwest. So there will be air transport for sure. Smaller lots going to different communities all over the place. But I think, you'll see a lot of the over the road as well, particularly, large moves into kind of big, McKesson distribution points, right? They're the Operation Warp Speed sort of designated distribution company, medical distribution company. So I think you'll see a combination of both of those modes being heavily utilized.
Okay. I think for Europe, when we were discussing, we were like, it's going to be trucked. But then we can see what's happening in the UK with the first Pfizer vaccines being shipped, and then the trucks being stuck at the border, and now it's being airborne. So Nathan, what is the situation in Europe in terms of logistics? What is the plan, if there are already plans?
Yeah, I think in general, Celine, it's absolutely correct what you say. I think most of the regional distribution in Europe will be road transport with trucks, with limited air freight. The Brexit issue, of course, can add an extra layer of complexity specifically for the export out of continental Europe to the UK. Today, it's still moving via the road. There's green lanes being put in place. There's like special assistance from the border police to make sure these trucks are not stuck in the traffic jams that are already there. And but before military planes will start moving, as we have read in some news articles, I think there's other options that are also available, like the good integrator networks in Europe of DHL Express, for example, having a hub in the UK and some potential commercial flights, but theoretically also the military could play a role. But it's in the newspaper, but there are no real specific scenarios being activated yet. So it's a lot of speculation, I guess.
Okay. JC, I'm going to you for Asia. How is the Asian countries getting organized? Is there any coordination body in Asia for that?
Well, there isn't a centralized coordinating party in Asia that I'm personally aware of. Some of the countries are coordinating their procurement and distribution efforts on their own, and all participating in the COVAX program.
Yeah.
So, but having said that, in terms of the trade lanes, I think in Asia we are expecting quite a bit of intra-Asia movements. We have vaccines manufacturers in China, and there's a huge contract manufacturing in India. So we do see quite a bit of, we foresee quite a bit of intra-Asia movements, as well as imports from Europe as well. And even down under like Australia, we also know that they have their own vaccines, such as the one that is developed by University of Queensland, which has the ambition to export the vaccines globally as well. So we hope that Changi Airport actually can work very closely with the vaccines producers and international organizations to be a conduit of all these trade flows in the region.
Okay. So we are getting close to the end. There are many other topics I would like to cover, but maybe just one final, very also hot topic this week. It's the security issue. We already saw, the minute the Pfizer vaccines has been approved by the UK, we heard in the news that there has been some cyber attacks. So security issues, maybe in the physical world and as well as the cyber world. So what is your view on that? What is your recommendation about security? Emir, maybe you want to start?
Sure. I think the key here is again collaboration. I know we've been saying it over and over again, but it's really true in the security space. Collaborating among all the supply chain players is going to be critical to making sure that these vaccines are kept safe and away from people that want to either take them, steal them, or produce counterfeit, etc. So I think that's one of the key factors is collaborating among all the stakeholders, making sure that you're communicating with the individual security companies, whether you're at the forwarder, the airline, obviously working very closely with the federal and state security officials, and even your own local police departments in your communities are also going to be playing an important factor in all of this.
Julia, is it really high? I guess it's high on your agenda as well, the security measure.
Yeah, of course, but it's a very sensitive topic as well, because we as an airline is one part, I would say, segment link of the supply chain, right? We can do as much, but I think we definitely need, like Emir said, to have a more transparency and talking to the airports, especially to those airports that are smaller, don't have experience with large volumes, with so high value goods as well, handling. And we'll definitely have to do risk assessments, but we also cannot assess all handlers in the world as well, where the people need vaccine. Therefore, it's just talking to the supply chain partners and trying to find a solution. Sometimes it's going to be even some tailor-made solutions, right? Because not all airports have CCTV cameras and really fixed process transport security, certification programs as well. So yeah, that's a lot of questions to answer still. A lot of, yeah.
Maybe another one for local communities, Nathan.
Yes, I think there again, Emir already said it. Work together, identify weak links. But I think it's not only, we should not only focus on the handling and the storage at the airport and then flying the goods from point A to B. Also the first mile, the delivery to the airport from a manufacturing site, and the last mile will be critical. We've already seen it with some vaccines moving through Brussels. There was particular attention to the road transport from the factory to the airport with police escorts and so on. I think these are elements we are not used to, but that will have to be incorporated in the risk analysis and assessment of the total supply chain from factory to patient.
Yeah, indeed. And it was also the case for the PPEs, though it's less critical in terms of type of product, but it was also an issue we had to deal with the protective equipment. Guys, I would like to thank you. We are actually at the end of the webinar. We have lots of other questions that were raised in the Q&A. So just for the audience, we are keeping the questions. We listed all of them. And if they are not answered through the white paper that is going to be released, we will try to provide an answer to individual questions. Bert will have some work to do for that. I'm volunteering Bert already. So the slides, because it was also requested, the slides will be made available. The recording of this session will be made available. You can also contact us if you have additional questions, and we hope you find it useful for you. Get ready for the coming white paper with quite a lot of really good set of information. There are also lots of other partners that are working on this. We are not competing, we are complementing each other. It's really important to look at what everybody is doing to get ready. The challenge of distributing the vaccine requires everybody to work together, and this is the main call from both TIACA and pharma.io. It's collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. So I will leave you guys with that. I hope you have a good end of the day, the week. We will discuss. We will have 2 more webinars as part of the Air Cargo Forum. Tomorrow it's drones, and drones can be used for the delivery of vaccines in hard-to-reach locations. So maybe something that the UN is willing to look at and consider. And the last one is all about collaboration. So on Thursday we will have Uniting Air Cargo webinar. That's TIACA's commitment to the air cargo industry. It's to represent the industry and unite the industry towards common goals. So don't miss those 2 last webinars this week. And if you can't make it, it will be also recorded. So have a good day and talk to you soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.